Hello and welcome to the Gaggle What We Challenge, and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. And today, we are very fortunate to be joined once again by Scott Ritter. He's, of course, a frequent guest on the Gaggle, and we always are very flattered by his presence. So a lot has happened, Scott, since we last spoke. We've had the counteroffensive Ukraine. We also had the NATO summit in Vilnius that neither seems to have resulted any major advances. But before we get onto that, I want to address the latest controversy that you, Scott, have been involved in, and that involves Gonzalo Lira, who has appeared a number of times on the Gaggle. And Scott, you've presented a particular thesis about what you think happened to him, what he's doing, who he really is. And this has brought you into conflict with a number of members of the alternative media. So perhaps we could just start off, Scott, with you explaining what your take on Gonzalo, what happened, what's going on now, and how this is going to pan out.
My take on Gonzalo has been consistent since April of 2022, when he was taken into custody by the Ukrainian SBU and released. He was taken into custody because of his online activity, which was deemed to be openly hostile to the interests of Ukraine. I think before we set up and people go, well, it's just posting on it. In March of 2021, Ukraine formed something called the Center for Countering Disinformation. And in March of 2022, with the funding and guidance of the United States, the Center for Countering Disinformation classified the kind of activity that Gonzalo Lira was engaged in, what we're engaged in right now, as information terrorism, and that the people who do it are information terrorists. Now, this isn't just rhetoric. They said that information terrorists must be treated as terrorists are treated. And remember, they're using this term in conjunction with, the support provided by the United States, who actively seeks out and kills terrorists preemptively without any due process. So I have to calm down, because I'm very Marine Corps sometimes, and my language gets salty. So I need to.
Well, it's okay here.
It's okay. We won't be too shocked.
I'm prohibited by my wife. Got in a lot of trouble yesterday.
A higher authority, yes.
A much higher authority. But I'll just say it's time for people to grow up. And I mean this with all due respect to everybody. I support anybody who wants to engage in civil debate, discussion, and dialogue. Prior to April 2022, I supported Gonzalo Lira. It's not my cup of tea, but I did two things with him. It is what it is. But we're at war. I want people to understand that. Peter, you know this. George, I hope you know this. People die. This is an information war, but it's not just about sitting around and sending mean tweets. People die. There is a hit list, the Florence hit list. I'm on it. Okay? The Center for Countering Disinformation.
There was a major terrorist attack in Moscow today.
Yeah.
In the Moscow area today.
The Center for Countering Disinformation puts out daily, weekly bulletins on who the number one threat to Ukraine in terms of information warfare is. I've been topping that list consistently for a long time. I take this seriously. This ain't a game. And I just get a little frustrated sometimes when people just treat this as though we're just out here having a conversation, guys. It's a debating club. There are life and death consequences to this, what's going on. This is directly related to not only what's going on the ground in terms of war in Ukraine, but around the world in terms of geopolitics. And we can even take it to another level. We're sitting here discussing issues that relate to, for instance, an American strategic objective of defeating Russia strategically. That means destroying Russia. Russia has said, should America come close to that, or should NATO come close to that, we're going to kill the entire world by firing off our nuclear weapons, because that's why they exist, to protect us from an existential threat. And yet Ukraine is saying we need all the support in the world so that we can retake Crimea, retake Zaporizhia, retake Kherson, retake the Donbass, which means we want to trigger thermonuclear war. This is what we're talking about, people. This is about life and death for the world. So now let's understand that we're at war. It's not just a shooting war, it's an information war, but the information war is dead serious. So when you have somebody like Gonzalo Lira, who is out there interfacing with everybody, I mean, he was literally everywhere, which is okay. I'm not jealous. I like that. I like the idea of people out there talking. But then he gets arrested for that activity, released 5 days later, and starts straight up doing the same thing. In the world that I used to live in, which was the real world, where we have spy versus spy. I've done information warfare operations in my life. I've run human assets. I've done all this in my prior life. And a red flag went up and said, why is this happening? How is this happening? And I made the decision at that time. And people, it's not that I'm doing this right now. People are waking up to the fact that, but I said straight up, he's an SBU asset. He's been turned. And I called him, I said that to his face. And he went silent for a while, though first he came out and attacked me, but that's okay.
So you said this just sorry to interrupt, you said this in April 2022 when he was first arrested and then released. You said it right away that he's an SBU asset.
I said, we have to treat him as an SBU asset. And he reached out to me several times saying, why are you calling me an SBU asset? I said, explain to me the circumstances of your arrest. Explain to me why you're able to go back and do what you did. And we can have a discussion about it. But until which time, and he said, I mean, he was released under house arrest. That means he's released under conditions of being controlled by the SBU. He gets his computers and phones taken away. He gets one back under house arrest. He gets a computer back under house arrest. He starts up his YouTube channel, and under house arrest, he continues to interface with people. He's an SBU asset.
Well, Scott, I can tell, not that you need to be reassured, but the events were unfolding. That was exactly people around me, some of them former intelligence operatives, said exactly the same thing, that, you can't really, Peter, having contact with him, you do at your own peril. That's what I was told, paraphrase.
Yeah, and again, the issue comes down to people say, well, so what? I mean, people who I have respect for. I respect the Durant. There's not animosity here between me and the Durant. I respect them, but their thing was, so what? So what? What is Gonzalo going to collect?
Yeah, but Scott, I mean, it's attention getters with attention getters. Okay, that's how I kind of look at it.
Right,
it was a flag to wave to get notoriety without substance. That's how I looked at that exchange.
No, I understand, but it's not harmless. It's not a harmless exchange. That's what people need to understand. This right now is not a harmless exchange. Okay, what we're doing right now is we're having a discussion where you're learning a lot about me. You're learning a lot about my beliefs. You're getting a psychological profile of who I am and what I am. All right? Now, I don't care, but my point is there are people out there who do care, who sit there and say, what makes Scott Ritter tick? What makes, how can we tweak him? How can we push this button, push that button, etc.? Ukrainians are doing this. The CIA knows me very well. They know how to make me do things. Everybody knows I'm an open book. You just saw, you can get me spun up very easily. So yeah, I'm too easy. I'm too predictable. But my point is, when you're engaged in information warfare, there are literally rooms of people who are mapping out the connectivity diagrams of all the players that are in there, and they're building profiles on each one. Now, some of these profiles will be used to create an AI-generated alias cover story. And then they're going to hire somebody, and they're going to bring them in, and that person is going to spend a couple weeks assuming the character, and then they're going to get an account, and they're going to start coming in, and they're going to start infiltrating themselves, and they know how to do it because they've watched everybody do it. They're going to come in, they're going to build trust, build communities, and then they're going to do things. They lead conversations, they insert misinformation, and they begin the whole process of bringing the edifice down. That's what's happening.
And Scott, the community that they're directing at, the community that this project is directed at, is actually quite finite. Okay, it's not a huge number of people.
Right.
It's actually a pretty small cadre at the end of the day.
Yeah, and and one of the things I pointed out, I wrote an article about this, and in there I'm straight up. I say they're using the GCHQ playbook, which has been around for many years. And one of the key aspects, one of the events they do is to come in there and create tension that creates an internal dynamic, a fight that fractures it apart. I said, they succeeded. Okay, they succeeded. There's a fracture now between me and them. But this is okay because I'm calling it out. I'm saying this is what it is, guys. This is reality. Wake up, grow up, and change what you're doing so that at least you're aware of this dynamic. People say, well, Scott, you shouldn't be saying anything. I mean, that's like blaming me for your cancer diagnosis because I say you've got cancer. Oh my God!
By being silent, you let this gambit succeed.
It's not just a scam, war. By remaining silent, I'm actually facilitating an enemy. And I know we're supposed to be journalists. I'm not. I mean, I play the role of journalist on sometimes and all that.
You're pretty good. You're pretty good.
You're supposed to be objective. I try to be. But look, there is right and wrong. There is good and evil. And in this issue, Russia is on the right side of history. Ukrainians are evil, Nazi-supporting Banderist scum that are getting worse every day, and they're supported by Western governments who are openly backing it. When you have former congressmen on their Twitter profile proudly say Slava Ukraini, when you have former heads of NATO, Slava Ukraini, when you have the Speaker of the House, Slava Ukraini, over and over and over again, there is no room for objectivity here.
Right. But so Scott, how are they playing Gonzalo Lira? So he comes out from this prison, and then he's sort of holding these roundtables, and then what? Essentially, through these roundtables, Ukrainian intelligence was gathering information about all the participants in these roundtables. Was that the objective, or was it just to create a persona? And then he whacks you, So Gonzalo Lira accuses Scott Ritter of CIA or something like that.
Gonzalo Lira accusing me is irrelevant. I don't think the SBU would go through any rigmarole. You people do that for free. Okay, so it's not like they're going to gain anything having Gonzalo Lira do something that people do for free. No. Again, as I pointed out in the article. And when you take a look at the GCHQ Manual for Online Human Intelligence Collection, I think it's called Hofstede Dimensions. Basically, how to the dynamics of the behavioral psychology of group dynamics. All right, it's a real thing done in the intelligence business all the time. In order to do that, you have to have data points. You have to collect data. Now, you can do it indirectly, meaning just passively monitoring. But the best way to do it is to be in charge of the experiment, not to observe the experiment, but to be in charge of the experiment. And to be in charge of the experiment means you know when to stimulate, you know how to stimulate. You have a cause, you look for the effect, and all that kind of stuff. Gonzalo Lira was running, in my opinion, through his roundtable, because you have to understand the roundtable is a controlled event. It's being controlled by the SBU. If my premise is correct, and there isn't an intelligence professional in the world, not a single one. Go to the SBU right now, find their online experts and tell me you'll find one of them that says, now Scott's wrong on this one. No, I'm not. Go to the GCHQ and find someone. They won't say Scott's wrong on this one. Not a single person who is involved in online human intelligence collectivity will say, I'm wrong. They'll say the red flag is up and we have to treat the red flag as real. So the roundtable that Gonzalo Lira was orchestrating was a petri dish of data collection to fill out the databases of behavioral psychological profiles of the universe of people who are engaged in activities the Ukrainian government deems to be terrorism. That's what was going on there. It's not about him calling me a name or calling this. This isn't a sketch. This
Right.
is amazing.
When I said calling you now, I didn't quite, I maybe didn't express it so well. It's more like, once he wins everybody's trust, and then he comes along and say, hey, well, I have it on good authority, then so and so, whom everybody had trusted, is really working for the FSB or something like that. In other words, and it's something, wow, Gonzalo Lira has really done the number on so and so. That's kind of what I meant.
If what I would say is this: that's so crude, and I'm not picking on you. I'm saying that why go through the effort to blow your asset? The reason why you build up these psychological profiles, the behavioral profiles, is that Gonzalo Lira isn't going to be the one saying it. He's going to, first of all, his job is to facilitate the collection of data. Then what happens is, by injecting aliases into this, they create sub-discussions, subcultures. And Gonzalo Lira is not going to he's not going to get his hands dirty on this one. He's going to sit there and continue, but somebody else is going to inject the idea. Then somebody else is going to elevate the idea. Then somebody else is going to echo the idea. And it's that the destruction is going to happen without any fingers being pointed to Gonzalo Lira. That's how a professional runs online human intelligence events. You don't blow your source, because if Gonzalo Lira is the one calling it out and then he fails, let's say it backfires, because that's always a chance. Now the roundtable loses its luster. People may not want to come on it. No, you want to keep the collection going. And the whole purpose of the collection isn't to make Gonzalo the central player in terms of the event. You have other people do it, the people that you're recruiting. And that's what people don't understand. This community we operate in has been infiltrated, largely because of the actions of Gonzalo Lira and the roundtable. Effective aliases have been put in place. There are people out there injecting thought right now. I can go on my Twitter feed. I can go on the responses to the Substack, and I will tell you right now, many of the people who are putting comments in there are working for hostile intelligence services. And the comments they're putting in there are written based upon the information collected in the petri dish of data collection that was the roundtable. That's how it works. This is why it has to be called out. People need to understand what's going on. It's not about me disliking Gonzalo Lira. I do actually dislike him. I'm going to be straight up and honest about it. He makes me very uncomfortable as a human being. In the story, I'm not one of these people.
I have to say that I had exactly the same impression. I mean, I didn't really figure it out the way you have, but I had the same feeling in my two interactions. So there's something about this guy that I don't get, I don't like. But Peter, I mean, I don't know whether you want to talk about, but he kind of directly approached you, and so I don't, I mean, you can talk about it. If you don't want to talk about it.
Be very vague about it, but I mean, he was looking for a possibility to resettle in Russia. He was looking for employment, and I told him, and this was after he was put on house arrest, which I've never understood, and how I could be communicating with him under house arrest. I didn't understand that. And I just said, just keep your head down and maybe just go silent and wait for the next move in this conflict and then reassess where you are. But I had a very kind of hands off. Is that, I mean, I just didn't understand how these people are not they're civil libertarians, okay? And so the fact that he was trying to make a strong connection with me made me feel uncomfortable. I mean, the way I kind of look at him, it was just a crisis tourist, and not really someone of a lot of depth. I mean, he was very descriptive, which can always be very helpful. I mean, being on the ground, but making approaches to me and trying to see if he could get into RT or something like that, and I just kind of let it fade away because of the same conversation that we're having right now. I had it many times with George, even a few days ago. Like, this story doesn't make any sense. That's what George and I were saying, because RT ran this story and I just didn't understand the sequence of events. It didn't make any sense. And so, yeah, I mean, what you say makes perfect sense to me, but George and I intuitively understood this is something that's not right here, okay? And we didn't go forward with it.
No, and I look, it's a tough story. I have to be honest. I had many people tell me, just leave it alone. Leave it alone. Don't talk about it. Don't. But I this is where the puritanical Marine in me comes in. If something's there and it's wrong and I'm aware of it, I gotta, I can't, and it matters. The other thing is I actually did sit back and say, does this matter? And so what I did is I started the research for this article to dig in deeper. And the more I researched, I went, oh yeah, this really matters. This has to be put out there. Now, what people choose to do with it, it's their business. But at least I feel that I have done my duty to put something out there about how I feel about this from a professional standpoint, and how people choose to react is up to them. But no one can ever say from now on that well, there's no way I could have known about that, or I would never have known or suspected this. There it is, guys, in black and white. He's an SBU asset, straight up. Now people say, why did he get rearrested and everything? I start with just April 2022. He was arrested, released, continued the activity. That's all I really need to know. Everything that happened after that is just drama. It's drama. Much of it's suspicious. Much of it's about, it doesn't make any sense, half of it. But what people don't understand is when you're arrested and flipped, in the West, that's something we call a police confidential informant. Happens every day. Okay, you want to take down the drug cartel, go find the drug dealer, flip them. Then what? Do you have the drug dealer go out there and stop selling drugs? No, he's got to continue to sell drugs. He has to keep it going. You want him to sell drugs? Heck, you want him to become the best drug dealer ever so that he rises up the cartel. That's what happens. But there's conditions. For instance, all the money you make while you're selling drugs, bring back to the cops. We're in control of this operation. You're not in control. We control your life. One of the things that came out about Gonzalo Lira is that he had, $100,000+ in a PayPal account. He was monetizing his YouTube. I don't object to anybody monetizing anything. Please do it. Make as much money as you can. Make millions of dollars. I'm happy for you. But if you're a SBU controlled asset and you're told that by monetizing, which is good cover, by the way, except it's not, because we can get into why is he able to monetize an account from Kharkiv, Ukraine, that is heavily critical of everything that gets everybody else demonetized out in the real world. That's one of those things that make you wonder what's going on. But they think it's good cover, so he's doing it. But he wasn't authorized to do it. He got called out on it. He came up with a story about beating up and torture in prison. Who knows if it's true? Who knows not? I don't care. My point is that people say, why would he be rearrested? And my answer is, police confidential informants are rearrested all the time because they break the agreement. And I think there's just plenty of circumstantial evidence out there that shows that Gonzalo Lira probably violated the terms of his parole and got picked up again. Then he got released. He violated his terms of parole again, and he got picked up again. Who knows what's going on with him right now? But the idea that the SBU would never arrest a controlled asset, wrong answer. Cops arrest controlled informants all the time.
Part of it is, of course, in order to build credibility. There's hey, he can't possibly be an asset. He's just been arrested. We've seen in The Sopranos. They did this all the time. You have an asset, then he'd be arrested. Whoa,
I knew The Sopranos were going to come up. I knew it.
Yeah. So that's it. You build the credibility, and so that would make sense. But what about this most recent, an attempt to escape, an attempt to enter Hungary? Do you have any?
And I'm sorry, George, to telegraph it before the event, which.
Look, again, now we're getting into. Remember who Gonzalo Lira is, first of all. He's a man who used to write fiction, adventure stories, things of that nature. He's a lifestyle coach who the whole thing's about creating personas, creating drama, dealing with things. One can imagine that that's what was going on here. He's creating drama, etc. I always hate when people do this, but I'm going to do it anyways because we're having a conversation. I hate people who go, I know something you don't know, but I can't tell you.
Yeah.
But Peter, the reason I'm bringing it up because you just did something. George turned to you and said, you have an experience. And you said, okay, I'll talk about it, but you don't want to get into it too much. And you gave the experience of your interaction with Gonzalo Lira. What I can say is this: within the span of 48 hours, I've had a significant number of people contact me with experiences. And the experiences are backed up by screenshots of chat exchanges. And I'm just going to say that, the case of Gonzalo Lira going to the border isn't on the lake. There's 2 feet underneath that are doing this. And, this has nothing to do with what he was saying. Okay, there was just a lot of stuff going on there. And if you look at it, you could come up with, for instance, again, I don't want to talk about what people told me in confidence. Let's talk about what happened. Why the beep would Gonzalo Lira want to work for RT? He doesn't want to work for RT. He wants to create controversy. He wants to create problems. He wants to collect intelligence. He wants to do this. You put feelers out to find its stimulus. Contact you, get you involved, find out how things work, collect information. Now, you can say it's innocent if it's done just for you. You can say, well, he innocently was trying. But at the same time that he's telling you, hey, I only want to work for you. I only want to do this. But he's doing it to 15 other people. This is blanket collection, taking advantage of at a moment in time where a profile exists. Now, is this him doing it on his own, or is this directed collection activity? And I would say that because of his past of what I believe is absolute confirmation that he was a controlled SBU asset, I would say that when he's reaching out to a half dozen or more people of similar profiles, asking them for things that could get them in trouble or could get other people in trouble, to me, and then another red flag goes up. I wouldn't trust this man as far as I could throw him.
Well, because I had similar suspicions, I made it very clear to people at RT that if this person approaches you and uses my name, ignore it.
Yeah,
okay?
don't pay attention. Yeah. I look, as a human being, let me put it this way. Gonzalo Lira, he built his own house. And what I mean by that is whatever circumstances he found himself in April 2022, it wasn't through innocent passage. He built that house. He built it. And now he has to pay the price for what he's done. If he was arrested, confronted with very difficult options, like we'll kill you if you don't do X, he made a decision. Am I sympathetic for the man that he was put in that situation? To an extent, but he put himself in that situation. He's not innocent. People need to remember he is not an innocent actor in any of this. He got himself to, you're in Kharkov in wartime, in the city that gave birth to the Azov battalion, in a city that's controlled by Banderists, and you're going to actively promote anti-Ukrainian government thematics. You created that problem. Don't tell me. I'm tired of people saying freedom of speech. There is no free speech in Kharkov in wartime. Stop playing games. Okay, and that's what Gonzalo Lira was doing. Either he was playing a game or he was already doing some other game going on there. Who knows? But he built the house. He now has to live in it. Do I want Gonzalo Lira released without harm? Yes. I want no physical harm to come to Gonzalo Lira. I want him to be able to reunite with his wife, who I believe is an innocent player in all of this, and I want him to be a father to his children. I want that to happen. But what I won't do is whitewash any of this. It has to be called out for all that it is. And again, is it possible that when all's said and done, Gonzalo Lira comes out and he can document that all of this was innocent? that it was just a big misunderstanding. Is it possible? Sure, anything's possible. Will I apologize? Not on your life. Because my job right now is not, this is not a court of law. We're at war. I want to bring people back to this. We're at war. And when a red flag exists, you have to act on the red flag. And nobody can tell me that it's unreasonable to say that a red flag exists when you are caught, released, and continue to do the same activity.
Scott, how do you explain the fact that somebody like Larry Johnson, who has an intelligence background just as you have, how come he disagrees with you so much? Can you explain that?
No, Larry has to explain that because I like Larry. I said some things last night. I'll say it again. It makes no sense. It's disingenuous what he said. What I don't understand about Larry is because of his intelligence background, why did he put up such a blatantly false, disingenuous, misleading argument? Because what he said in response to what I'm talking about, at any time in our conversation, have I insinuated the CIA sought to recruit Gonzalo Lira, an American citizen? Did I ever say that? I never even hinted at that. I talked about the SBU flipping a prisoner. That's what I've talked about. But Larry's whole thing was the CIA would never recruit this guy. It's a paperwork nightmare. I can't believe Scott Ritter thinks this. Hey, Larry, I have to be careful because I don't want to. I like Larry Johnson. I don't want to. But this is so disingenuous that it could raise the notion that maybe he doesn't know anything about human intelligence collection, that maybe all he was an analyst, and that he has only indirect knowledge of human intelligence collection. Because if he actually was a human intelligence collector or somebody involved in that, he would know what I know, that the CIA doesn't, and many times doesn't do the dirty work. That what the CIA will do or MI6 will do is have a friendly service slip the asset and manage the asset. No paperwork on our side. We're not responsible. They flip it, they manage, and then you sit back and you gather the intelligence, you put in the inputs, you indirectly participate. That's how it's done. Larry knows that. And Larry knows that that's what I'm talking about. Larry knows that I'm talking about the SBU flipping up what is the equivalent of a police-controlled informant. I'm not talking about the CIA recruiting an American citizen, which they can't do. It's illegal. But Larry brought it up anyways and made that the cornerstone of his argument, and one has to ask why. Why would he do that? If he is what he claims to be, and I have no reason to doubt it, why would he do that? And I have a reason why, and I'll challenge Larry with it. Because you fell into the Gonzalo Lira trap. Because you became hypnotized with Gonzalo Lira. Because you are on one too many round tables with Gonzalo Lira, and you're not willing to accept the reality that you were played. Real men step up to the plate and say, I was played.
Well, our personal experience. He's been. I think we talked to him twice, right? George?
Twice he's been on the Gaggle.
Well,
yeah.
I mean,
and I was, I think, on one of his roundtables. So,
yeah, but I mean, there was no value added. It was only affirmational, always wanting to agree, which was kind of boring. Okay, because I'm a wonk, a policy wonk. I want to understand what's going on. I don't really need all the extra color. I mean, it doesn't hurt, but I mean, it doesn't go very far. It doesn't move the dial. Okay, so that's why George and I weren't hypnotized. You and I both each time just kind of scratched our heads. That was kind of weird.
see, that's a valuable experiment. Now imagine I'm GCHQ and I want to learn more about Peter Lavelle and George Szamuely. How do I do this? Put my boy on there, Gonzalo, and have him interact with you. Have him do things, and then watch your response. And I'm learning about you. So even though for you it wasn't a valuable experience, for his controllers it was an invaluable experience, because they're building a psychological profile, a causal effect profile that in the human intelligence business is actually very important to have.
I wonder, after the thousands and thousands of broadcast hours I have, what kind of profile they've made of me. Okay. They just probably think I'm a lunatic.
But nonetheless, it was interesting that he was very, very determined to talk to you. And I think in one of our, when we had him on the Gaggle, he just kept talking to you until I had to leave, and I said, well, I can't stay, but you can carry on talking. So I thought it was very interesting that he was
also, George, do you remember the first time he didn't want to use any video? He just wanted audio. Remember?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was odd.
Yeah.
The other thing you have to, but people, and again, Larry Johnson knows this, Ray McGovern knows this. In the intelligence business, passive collection isn't good. I mean, you need to be in control of the process. That's why intelligence officers often fail, because the best, in my experience, the best human intelligence collection takes place right now, what you and I are doing. Straight up being honest, having an honest conversation, no pretense, nothing. You're going to open up more. I'm going to open up more. We're going to learn a lot. The worst collection is when I compromise you, I have something over you, and now you are beholden to me in what you're doing. It poisons everything. But the way intelligence services work is they have to have the second, because they have to be in control. They have to be in control of you. They have to control everything about you before they trust the product that comes out, even though many times the product that comes out will be an inferior product than it would be if we went through this honest, open, uncontrolled relationship. And so, Peter, you said, they've watched thousands of hours of me, and I'm sure, George, they've done the same thing with you, but those are uncontrolled hours. It's so valuable to have somebody like Gonzalo Lira on the inside who's stimulating, because now they can run an experiment. He can ask a question. Remember, it's a question written by a handler. He asks the question, and now they get the stimulus. How does Peter respond? How does George respond? Now this is information they can trust, they can use. It's their experiment. That's why it's so important. That's why I get frustrated when people say, well, it's happening anyways. These conversations are happening anyways, but they're not controlled conversations. And in the intelligence world, passive collection is not the desired method of collection. You must be in control. And again, Larry Johnson knows this. He knows this. He knows this. And yet he refuses to accept because he got sucked in. That's my personal assessment.
One of the things I discussed with George after our second encounter with him is that I find it really quite curious is that he must, I said something like, he must not interact with people that know a lot of detail about the conflict, because it was always very general things, and it was kind of frustrating because it's not very interesting. Okay, you're saying things that we obviously all know, and it's done in such a general way, and it was 100% lacked analysis, which that's what I'm interested in, is analysis. And I like to be challenged. George and I fight like cats and dogs sometimes, trying to get the truth out somehow. And that's the only way it happens. But that experience was extremely passive, and it was very uninteresting, and it was a waste of time.
Yes. Yeah. That's right. And the whole thing, to be honest, the whole story seemed very strange, because he just sort of sprang up out of nowhere. I'd never heard of him just before April 2022.
But we had no reason to ever hear from him.
Right, and now suddenly he's doing this roundtable, and all these people coming onto his roundtable and everything. You think, whoa, how did that happen? I mean, everyone else, there's a track record. People have known. I mean, I've known about you, Scott, for decades, and anyone else. But suddenly, boom. He just sprang up out of nowhere, and he's suddenly the go-to person on Ukraine. So right away, that made me think there's something very strange about all of this.
Again, we can say that a lot. We can say that a lot. Wow, I'm tired and my English is faltering. We can say that about a lot of people in the alternative.
Alternative media.
The alternative media. They're when this war came up, people that never heard of suddenly emerge and enter in, and they through this echo chamber of bouncing back, supporting each other. That's what it is. We must support each other, and it's bounce, 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 boom, and suddenly there's somebody up here. Everybody's going, you have to listen to so and so's analysis. I'm like, but who is he? Why am I listening to him? You have to, and then you listen and you're going, but there's nothing original in this analysis. It's been
Well,
echoed and repeated.
also, Scott, it's very interesting. It's something that I would hear from Lira, which, it doesn't add any analytical value, but he's a cokehead. It was always very personal. And, Hunter Biden's a cokehead, I guess. Okay. But, that doesn't mean I think, I should somehow separate that from the greater picture of his illegal financial behavior. But, it was always kind of like the, you probably remember the Inquirer.
I'm a cokehead.
National Enquirer. Okay. It was like, okay, but I mean, why are we talking about it?
No, I agree. I'll give you an example. And Peter, you and I and George, we did this too. Do you remember my great switcheroo? My game-changing moment.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, and you remember the controversy that
Yes.
swirled up around that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. All I did is behave like a professional. All I did is sit back and examine the data set and look at changes that are taking place and then draw logical conclusions based upon it. So I looked at a data set that had Russian objectives change dramatically, but no additional resources were applied to those objectives to achieve those objectives. So you begin to say there might be a deficit of resources available. And then you see tremendous resources pouring in on the other side. And you say, this is a game-changing situation. And so you call it out, as you do in the intelligence business. We do that all the time. You sit there and you write a report. Hell, excuse me, again, my language, I gotta watch it. You know who else does that? Financial analysts. My wife works for a company, and they have a team of analysts who monitor stock market. Now imagine one day that you're sitting there saying, I think buying cans of Diet Coke is a good thing. It's a good thing. And Scott Ritter, who's the most massive consumer of Diet Coke in the world, decides to have a health kick, and he stops drinking Diet Coke, and and suddenly you realize people aren't buying as much. And they say, you might want to slow down on the Diet Coke purchase. It's not a good deal anymore. Now, people, according to what happened, and this is, you say, oh my God, you changed your mind. You were selling Diet Coke, but now you're saying it's bad. You suck. The worst. You're a sellout. No, you're a good analyst. I did that. But what I noticed is how quickly people, there were the usual suspects, the instant experts who have no original analytical capability. I didn't care about them because they're dilettantes. They really don't know what they're talking about.
That's their profession, is to be a professional dilettante. Okay.
So because
we're going to go to a break, and then we're going to have Laura Trump talk about the Palestine issue. Okay. Remember that, George?
It's just, so, they were jumping on, I could care. What got me, though, was the number of professional analysts, people who with a track record, who were like, you flip-flopped, you changed. I'm like, what the hell's your problem? Even people who wrote the presidential daily briefing, meaning that they know that they're professional, they know the business, were like, oh, you changed, it's unexplained. I said, what do you mean it's unexplained? I just walked you through the data points. Problem grows, resources dedicated to the problem remain the same, while on the other side, the resources dedicated to the problem expand. That is a game-changing thing. It doesn't mean that Russia's going to lose. What it means is that the game has changed.
Right. But the problem is that people too often want to hear something, and they want to hear something, and they want to repeat it again and again, even though the facts don't bear it out. And when you don't tell them what they want to hear, then they attack you. I mean, example with the cancer.
George, that has been the greatest added value of our podcast, because I will push against you, you'll push against me, reading the data points and trying to understand what they mean. And sometimes it gets testy. I mean, George is a great friend of mine, but he's a great friend of mine because he pushes back against me.
Exactly. And we have disagreements.
Because other people say, oh, well, I don't want to get Peter angry because he won't invite me on his program and all that. See, that's a disaster.
But what else is going on here, though? And we just talked about it. See, we're having an honest discussion here. And I'm not going to get upset, for instance, if George came out and said, well, Scott, I've thought about it, but what about this? What about that? What about this?
That's
I
what he
think
does.
your assessment's weak here. I think and I'd be like, wow, I'm going to defend my assessment, but man, there's some pushback here. If I'm not able to immediately fire back with 2 barrels, then he's got a point. Because if he's hit me with something and I'm going, blah, 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 maybe I hadn't thought this through. Maybe I need to hit pause. Maybe I need to go back, reconsider, regroup. That's what makes this valuable. And the fact that we're doing live makes it valuable for anybody watching because they get to see the process in place. But with this incident, now we're coming back to the alt media world because it's composed of about 98% instant experts, shake and bake experts. Okay. And how do they get up there? The whole thing is about followers. The whole thing is about influencing the whole thing. And so they grab onto an idea, they all latch onto it, and then they echo it up the ladder. Echo, 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 until they get to the top and everybody's following and saying, whoa. But now if you come in with original analysis that deviates from that, you're screwing up the plan. See, instead of me coming up with an original analysis, I'm supposed to sit there and echo, 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 promote, 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 like spam, like get those viewerships up, get those numbers up. Right. BS. My job isn't to do any of that. Right. My job is to look at the situation on the ground and look at the data and say, where do I take it? Guess what? It's going to change every time I do it. And then
it's very interesting. It's very interesting. What I've noticed is that I don't watch any cable TV anymore. When they let Tucker go, I decided to boycott Fox, and I have completely. I haven't watched anything since. But one of the observations I've had is that there's a lot of alternative out there, and some of it is good. I have to say some of it's good, but not on this topic, not on the topic of Ukraine. And what I find, and George, maybe you've had the same experience, is that there's this tendency to everyone to turn into a pretzel. I mean, they'll recognize the flaws of the Obama administration, of the Trump administration, particularly of the Biden administration, but they still try to keep bending it to, but it's still the bad Russians here. Right. And it comes out in a very weird way because, right. Because there's still that real fear of being called a puppet, or a collaborator and all of that. And it makes their reporting very warm. Let me give you an example. This program Breaking Points with Sagar Anjeti and Crystal Ball. On domestic politics, I watch them. I live far away. I don't have Tucker anymore, or very, very rarely. And so I need to get a kind of an idea of what's going on, okay? But when they hit Ukraine, I just think, I'm going to skip it because the last 15 times they did it was just awful, and I don't need to waste my time, okay? Oh. But they do draw upon what they think is alternative, but they're still very establishment people, okay? Yeah. And they're trying to segue it. I think one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is that I found it very interesting over the last couple of weeks. Blinken and Biden, Russia's lost. Russia's losing. Okay, yeah. But do we take on board the binary? Well, that means Ukraine's winning. Okay, no, they're not saying that. Okay, there's been a very interesting segue. It's been kind of slow, and then people start picking up on it and reacting to it, and it gets more and more illogical. Okay, and so even these people in what they call, I call it alternative media light, okay? Young Turks, okay? They try to be, alternative, but they're just an echo chamber for the left. And a lot of, what you hear like on Breaking Points is still an echo chamber of a combination of the left and right, okay? So you end up getting people that pick up on some things that we say gets filtered into their echo chamber. And it's like, well, on that data point, you're right, but it doesn't mean what you think it means.
Yep. No, two things on this. One, just to come back to, again, why, because I've been trying to figure out why people do what they do, especially people that I have respect for, and I'm trying to figure out what their motivation is. Yep. Because as an analyst, your motivation should be purely analytical. It should be about finding the most honest, accurate pathway to as close to the truth as you can get. That's what it's about. Let everything else be damned. Now, that works if you're on the payroll of an organization that wants that. I am blessed that I work for a company, and I'll call them out because they're a good company, Energy Intelligence Group, and they pay me to do that kind of analysis. Is it contentious? Ask my editors. I mean, we're
well, it means you're doing a good job. Okay.
The product is good and it gets to a good audience, but the most important thing is it gives me a foundation, an economic foundation of stability. So I have the ability to be pure in my analytical approach. Now, anything addition to that, like YouTube monetization or Substack subscriptions, that's frosting on the cake. I already have a delicious cake. That stuff is frosting. That means I get to have buttermilk or chocolate, get fatter, whatever.
Sprinkles.
But my point is, I don't give a damn about YouTube. We just got demonetized. We just started getting monetized. And yet, I mean, a guy called me, my friend Jeff Norman calls up, he goes, guess what? I said, what? He goes, we got a check from YouTube. I said, why? I didn't ask for it. He says it comes. It's there. You sort of automatically did it. You got over certain thresholds. But I went, holy crap. I called my wife. Hey, baby, we have more money coming in. She's good. Our daughter's getting married. We need the money. Bring it in. And then he called up and he said, we're not getting the money anymore. And I'm like, why? Well, we don't know why. But to me, it was like, okay, but I'm not going to change anything I'm doing to get monetized. But the people out there are people out there who have built an economic model that requires the echo chamber.
But that's what's so interesting is that nobody ever really accepts what you just said, that they have a financial stake in saying what they're saying. So when they say, well, so-and-so says this, yeah, but he's got a YouTube channel and he makes a lot of money. And the people who go to his YouTube channel, they want to hear something. That's what they want to hear. He tells them, and then they monetize it. Yeah.
One of the things this conflict is I've become aware of, and it's kind of a pet peeve I have. It's called responsible statecraft. But I mean, I think you both agree with me. And I there are people over there that are good people, nice people,
top-notch people. Yeah.
Top notch. But this conflict, and this comes into my mind every single day. Why are smart people saying such stupid things? That thought crosses my mind every single day, because some of these people, I know they know better. I know they do.
Well, again,
I have an answer for you. Yep. Ready for the answer? And I'll call her out. Kelly Vallejos used to be an editor at American Conservative.
Yep.
And
antiwar.com. Okay.
Yep. And she brought me into American Conservative, and we had a multi-year relationship that was fantastic. In fact, the last year that I wrote there, an article I wrote on the Strait of Hormuz crisis between the United States and Iran was the #1 article for American Conservative that year. And 3 of my other articles were in the top 10 or something like that. So our relationship was a successful relationship. And then it had to be terminated because they brought in new leadership, the new ethic, and a new this and a new that. And just out of the blue, I mean, literally 1 week she calls me and says, congratulations, #1 article, you're awesome. We're going to talk about raising the rate on your articles. And next week she called up and said, you're fired, you're done, we're dumping you. But she felt bad about it. So when she moved to responsible statecraft, she said, I'd like to bring you in. So the first article I wrote was about Russia. They took it, they published it online. The funders of responsible statecraft, the people who pay their salary, because this is where I learned, again, I was using a bad word, the hell with responsible. There's nothing responsible about them. They dance to the tune played by their paymasters. They pulled the article, they fired me, and Kelly had no response. She didn't know what to say. She was like, well, welcome to the real world, Kelly. There's no journalistic integrity in America anymore. It's all controlled by the money. And that's why, and it applies to alternative media sources as well. Anybody who has monetized themselves is dependent upon a behavioral model. Come back to what we were talking about here, a behavioral model that it can be tweaked to get clicks, and the clicks generate money. So people are like, well, this guy speaks out against this all the time and he's successful. He's successful because they want him to be successful. He's
right.
successful because there's no original thinking coming out of him.
I think sometimes there's Jimmy Dore is a very interesting exception, okay? Because he does get the clicks and the monetization, I suppose, because he does say things that people like, okay? And, you know, in my experience with Jimmy Dore, I was on with him twice. He knows his limits. I mean, he was on with RFK Jr. He said, no, you better talk to Max Blumenthal. Okay, that's not my wheelhouse. I mean, I think there's exceptions out there. But going back to responsible statecraft,
but Jimmy's a very good comedian, and he makes money being funny. See, Jimmy has talent. There's original product coming from Jimmy.
All three of us are conservatives, okay? Everybody knows that. And Jimmy Dore is a wacko progressive. And I would sit down and have a beer with him, okay? Because on the issues that matter to me, and where there's that intersection, it's great, okay? But going back to responsible statecraft, and this is something George has pointed out, I think it's very important, is that as critical as they might be in trying to be critical, as in a critique, George pointed out to me a few months ago, he said, but the Biden administration has done all the right things. The Biden administration is on the right path. And
you know, you have to follow the way they use language. For instance, if they ever say anything critical about the United States, they say the United States does something wrong. If they want to praise the Biden administration, then it becomes the Biden administration. But they never say anything negative about the Biden administration. They'll say negative about the United States, but never negative about Biden. There's money. George Soros is a funder, and Koch is a funder. So again, always very negative about Russia. They never say anything negative about China. You read all their articles, not one negative thing about China. You know, they write a lot about China. It's always, oh, we're being really mean to the Chinese, you know, but you can never be mean enough to the Russians.
George, I pointed this out to you, is that I went to looked at some of the authors that write for responsible statecraft, and I looked at their rhetoric about the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And you never come unprovoked, savage, aggressive. They never use that language. But when they use it to Russia, that's the only kind of language. But they have to. I mean, it's almost kind of what I call the comma excuse. You know, they comma and then savagely done so. You know, it is that they have to always add this extra color as if they're covering their ass, which I guess they are. Okay,
they are. Yeah.
You know, but again, you know. The reason why I brought this up is that, you know, why are smart people saying stupid things? And that's what really is so painful to me, because some of these people have written about like the Caucasus and South Ossetia and all that, which I thought was really, really good and inspired me. And then I see this and it just and they don't want to make, they will never make any kind of public comment about it, because I think working for responsible statecraft is kind of like being a Bloomberg journalist. And for those who don't know, Bloomberg pays the best. They pay well, very well for journalists, okay? And I think this is the kind of the online, quote unquote, analytical.
But you remember when Kelly Vlahos, because Scott brought her name up, you remember when Seymour Hersh wrote these expose about what happened to Nord Stream, you know, responsible statecraft didn't do anything. Day after day after day, made no mention.
4 days, George. 3 or 4 days.
Exactly. Nothing. No mention. And then Kelly Vlahos writes an article. Hey, why aren't the mainstream media writing about Seymour Hersh? How come they haven't addressed the Seymour Hersh? Well, you haven't addressed it. You haven't said anything about it. And she doesn't say anything about whether, you know, it's credible or not credible.
Right.
Mainstream media are not touching this. Whoa, why is that?
And George, also, when Lindsey Graham was booed off the stage in South Carolina, there were many reasons to boo Lindsey Graham, but I mean, no, that was the reason.
That's right.
Yes. I mean, I don't know which one of us said it to each other instantly. It's like, this is nuts.
Yeah.
But now, to get back to something that you said also earlier, Peter, about the rhetoric coming out, you know, Russia's losing. I mean, it's so counterfactual that it's absurd. But I think if anything, this article that I wrote and this debate that we're having, if anything makes us succeed, it's the notion of behavioral psychology and how important it is in terms of information warfare and shifting perceptions and shifting ideas. We know Russia's not losing. We know that NATO is losing, that the United States is losing, that Ukraine is losing. We know that there was a Jeddah conference where they were going to get together and discuss potential peace plans. Now, do winners discuss negotiated peace settlements, or do losers discuss negotiated peace settlements? So how do you begin to frame the fact that you're setting up for a negotiated settlement? How do you explain the fact that pressure is being put on Zelensky to alter the 10, rock solid conditions of peace so that none of those 10 are in play? It's psychology. You see, we're not negotiating from a position of weakness because Russia's losing. See, how do you explain to the American people that we're actually pushing for a peaceful settlement? It can't be because the counteroffensive has failed, because the Vilnius summit was a disaster, because we ran out of ammunition, we've ran out of tanks, we've run out of everything, we got nothing left. We're bankrupt, France is failing, Africa's going to suck France down the cesspool of life. Can't talk about anything. Russia's losing. It's just a simple statement put out there, echoed by the echo chamber that exists in mainstream media. Russia's losing. And next thing you know, there's a peace negotiation that was negotiated because Russia lost. Wait a minute, Russia got everything they wanted. Did they? Did they get everything they wanted? Didn't Russia want it? I mean, did you hear this? They wanted Kyiv. They wanted Kyiv.
No, I already have the solution. Is that when the settlement comes, they'll say, well, at least they didn't make it to Paris. We won.
We won. We kept them out of Berlin. We kept them out of Warsaw. We drew a line.
Well, also with Prigozhin, his Warhol 15 minutes of fame, Prigozhin's going to save Russia from Putin, and now Victoria Nuland is lamenting, don't let Wagner come to Niger.
Don't let him in. Don't let him in.
They twist themselves into pretzels.
I mean, I got to give Prigozhin a medal. I mean, I can't say I don't like, because I don't know the guy. I think what he did in June 23rd, 24th was despicable, treasonous, etc. But apparently a political decision has been made in Russia that forgives that crime in the interest of the greater good. Fine. Now he's in Africa, or at least his organization's in Africa. And holy cow, are they raising high hell. And, it's just, again, as an interested observer, just sitting back, it's like,
yep. Hold my beer. Hold my beer.
It's not that you have to pick sides, it's just entertaining. I mean, it's like, what the hell is going on? Now, I'm laughing about it, but I shouldn't, because the consequences of a conflict in Niger will be horrible. I mean, we're talking, there will be tens of thousands of dead, potentially hundreds of thousands of dead. There will be millions of displaced. This could trigger starvation. You talk about a migrant wave that could sweep in and flood Europe. This could trigger mass migration that Europe can't absorb. This could lead to, this has the potential for global disaster written all over it.
But the U.S. policy in Niger is kind of interesting. They've distanced themselves now from France. I mean, Nuland went there, talked to them. I mean, hey, these are terrible people. They illegally seized power. The Constitution has been violated and so on. And yet Nuland went there, talked to them, and said, whatever you do, don't let in the Russians. And so they talked to this guy who's this general who's U.S. trained. He's a good friend of ours, and the U.S. still hasn't characterized it as a coup.
That's right.
It's not a coup because they're not prepared to let Niger go. So the U.S. saying, whatever you do, just don't let in Putin.
But George, the analog to that is, don't let the Russians in, but do whatever you want with the French.
Yeah, exactly.
They just go.
No, absolutely. The Americans have been wanting the French out of Africa for decades. They've been seeking to push them out. Yeah.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, the cause effect. I mean, the escalation ladder. That seems to be one of these terms that's very popular nowadays. But the escalation ladder, in terms of consequences of French failure in Niger, I mean, it's huge, because the economic consequences to France. The uranium alone, the uranium issue alone, but just not only that, but the whole financial relationship France has with Africa that's falling apart. This could literally be the end of the French economy. The French economy is so heavily invested into the post-colonial relationship it has in Africa, that if this collapses, France won't recover. And if France fails, Europe fails. And if Europe fails, NATO fails. I mean, I don't understand the American position here to be so hands-off, because they need to understand that bad things are about to happen.
Oh God, it's so simple. Just don't let the Russians in. That's
Just don't let the Russians in.
That's the depth of their analysis.
Wagner.
We shouldn't be surprised. We shouldn't be surprised by that.
Okay, do you want me to?
This lack of analytical depth. Okay.
Do you want me to drive? You ready? We're going to drive. We're going to drive the Biden administration crazy. Just one second.
Scott Ritter, Wagner Center.
Okay. Right now, all the FBI, this behavioral science guys, he's working for Wagner.
That's the perks of negative fame, I suppose.
No, but I'm just saying, it's the same thing. We've had this. I used a bad word. I apologize for that. But we've had this conversation too about why can't we have a responsible discussion about Russia at all? And the answer is Putin. Not Putin the person, Putin the concept, Putin the word. Yep. Because no one on the side of being critical of Russia. I'm all in favor of critical discussion. And I do believe that there could be a responsible dialogue about geopolitical activity in the world where somebody could speak critically of Russia. That Russia's not immune to criticism, and people could come up. For instance, I'll be frank, Russia's relationship with Wagner is it's a weird relationship.
Very weird.
Well, it proved to be quite unhealthy. Okay, right. Also.
But not. I mean, if according to the Russians, Wagner was responsible for the death of Russian pilots, and he just wanders around St. Petersburg and so on.
Yeah, I don't understand it, and so I believe we should be able to have a critical discussion about this. And all that. But then the problem comes in the second you try to do that. Let's say that somebody was articulating in favor of Wagner. The response will be Putin.
Yeah,
well, I'm not talking about Putin.
But see, Scott, this is something that George and I have been talking about from the very beginning, and I do on my program, is that the inconsistent, the asymmetry of the conversation is that Russia is seeking and demanding security, and the West is on some kind of crusade, a moral crusade, and that's why they don't work together. That's why there cannot be any kind of dialogue. I don't want to sound trite, but on December 17th, months before the conflict started, the Russians said, "This is what we want." Okay, and it's there. I mean, and gentlemen, after everything that's happened since then, this god-awful conflict, those are still the things the Russians want. That hasn't changed.
Haven't changed at all. And and while we can sit here and say that Wagner is a kerfuffle, it's like, what is Wagner? Well, it's working. It didn't work in Russia. I mean, that was a bad thing. But in Africa,
you shouldn't have these private military organizations should not be in the home country. Okay, they should be.
I agree, but the model in Africa is a very successful model.
Yep.
I mean, and that's why I'm saying, Prigozhin gets I have screwed up everybody's analytical model about, life in general award. I'm going to give him the medal that says, how come I disagree with everything you did in Russia, but I'm looking at you in Africa going, wow.
The greatest compliment that has ever been paid to Prigozhin and to the Wagner Group was Victoria Nuland's visit to Niger.
It's the greatest recruitment ad anybody could ever do. If I were Wagner right now, I'd say, open up all the recruitment centers and put a poster out that says, Victoria Nuland doesn't want you to join. Everybody's going to say, I join, baby, sign me up, let's go. Because it's such a hated figure. And you have to wonder, who's writing this stuff for the Americans?
But that's the thing. I mean, remember when the coup first took place in Niger, there was a United Nations Security Council statement to which was unanimous. So Russia joined this UN Security Council statement that constitutional order must be restored. And then Wagner, Prigozhin, comes along and said, yeah, I'm in favor of the coup. I support the coup. So right away, he already distanced himself from official Russian foreign policy. And now he's still, I mean, he's presumably already in Niger, ready for maybe an invasion, may not be an invasion, but they're getting ready for it.
I love the fact, when I say I love the fact, again, I loved it as an observer, not anything, but there's Vladimir Putin, president of Russia, holding a Russian-African summit, and it is the epitome of class, of diplomacy, of respect for sovereignty, and all this stuff. And it's all genuine. None of it. I'm not saying none. But then behind the scenes, there's Prigozhin in jeans having a shadow conference. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, we got a couple thousand boys that are unemployed right now. What do you think?
Here's my card. Here's my card.
Yeah, we can fly them to Turkey. They can get on a chartered airplane, be in your country in no time flat. And Africans are going, yeah, take some of that. Because sadly,
but Scott, it goes back to September 2015, right after Putin's appearance at the General Assembly of the United Nations, announcing that Syria as a sovereign country has requested military assistance, and the George, you probably correct me, 6 weeks and 25 planes, and then ISIS is gone. Okay. I mean, the Russians went in, they did their job, and they did it with not much fanfare, actually. Donald Trump took credit for it. It's okay with me. The result is what I wanted. Right. Okay, the black flag no longer threatening Damascus. But when you get out of the Anglo echo chamber, is that people say, hey, they were pretty effective there. Okay,
right. But that's the problem that the United States. The United States have been fighting this war on terror in Niger and in Mali and Burkina Faso with no success. I mean, they've been there for years, no success. I mean, so Wagner goes in and actually gets the job done, and that's what matters. Can you beat these?
But it's a war crime. It's a war crime when Wagner does it. It's a war crime.
Right.
Anyway, I mean, unfortunately, guys, I gotta run.
No, I think we've covered
a lot of your time, Scott. Thank you very, very much.
Exactly. Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you for giving us your time, and we look forward to our next meeting. So remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.